A powerful German Shepherd puppy rescue story that will break your heart and heal it. When a tiny puppy was found lying beside a dry fountain, waiting for the water to return, everything changed. He wasn't crying. He'd run out of noise. The German Shepherd puppy lay with his nose touching a cracked plastic bowl, tongue dry, eyes fixed on a place where water used to be. Every breath was shallow and stubborn, like a promise he couldn't keep much longer. People had passed. He had stayed, because that's what a brave pup does when hope is the only thing left to drink. I knelt slow so he could see my hands. No sudden moves, no talking big. My name is David, 61, and I've carried more rescued puppies than I can count. But this young shepherd made my chest hurt in a way numbers don't explain. I cracked a bottle and tilted a cap into his bowl. 1 sip, then 2. His mouth shook so hard the water trembled with it. He tried to stand and folded again, an injured puppy apologizing with his eyes for not being stronger. "Easy, kid," I whispered, keeping the cap moving. He licked, coughed, licked again, then nudged my wrist like he was asking permission to keep living. That was the moment I slid my jacket under him, careful with the rubbed line where a collar used to be. No leash, no pressure, just arms. He didn't fight it. He settled into the fabric with a sound I felt more than heard, a tired, grateful exhale you don't forget. I stood with the little dog against my heart and the empty bowl dangling from my fingers. Clinic first, fluids, a chance. If his pulse could hang on from here to the door, we might just make it. The air inside the truck was hot enough to taste. I kept the rescued puppy close, his heartbeat a thin, nervous rhythm against my chest. He smelled like dust and fear, the kind of scent only a stray pup carries after too many nights alone. The vet was 15 minutes away. He didn't have 15 minutes. Every red light felt like a dare. His paw twitched each time the car slowed, like he was begging me not to stop. I kept whispering, useless words, but maybe he needed to hear them more than I needed to say them. "You're okay, little shepherd. Just hang on. I got you now." He blinked once, slow, like he understood. Or maybe that was just the heat playing tricks on me. When we pulled up to the clinic, I didn't even cut the engine. Car door open, jacket tight, I rushed in past the front desk. "Dehydration, possible heat stroke," I said. The vet tech took one look at the German Shepherd puppy and didn't ask another question. They cleared a table, ran saline lines, slipped a tiny muzzle, not for fear, for safety. His breathing rattled like dry paper, and I hated that sound more than anything I'd ever heard. They said it was a miracle he was still conscious. I said it wasn't a miracle. It was stubbornness. This little dog had waited beside an empty fountain for a reason. And now, as the first drops of fluid slid into his vein, his paw twitched again. Softer this time, like maybe he believed the waiting was over. But survival isn't the same as safety. I didn't know it yet, but his fight was only beginning. And so was mine. He didn't sleep that first night. Neither did I. The German Shepherd puppy lay under a thin blanket in the kennel, hooked to a slow IV drip that glowed like a firefly in the dark. His breathing was ragged, uneven, a sound you feel more than hear. Each inhale was a tiny rebellion, like he was daring the world to give up before he did. I sat on the cold floor beside him, elbows on my knees, watching that line on the monitor rise and fall. You'd think after years of doing this, it would get easier. It doesn't. Every rescued puppy brings his own kind of silence, the kind that crawls inside you and stays there. This one had the silence of someone who'd learned early that crying didn't help. Around midnight, the vet came in, nodded at the chart, whispered, "He's stable enough for now." But stable doesn't mean safe. It just means the fight isn't over yet. I reached through the bars, slow and steady, let my fingers rest near his paw. He didn't pull away. He just twitched his ear, the smallest movement, but it felt like a handshake. A brave pup's way of saying, "I'm still here." They said I should go home, get some rest. I laughed under my breath. How do you rest when you've seen what heat does to a body that small? When you've seen a loyal puppy hold onto life like it's the only thing left to protect? By morning, the IV bag was almost empty. The vet leaned in and said, "If he makes it through today, he's got a chance." I looked at that little shepherd, barely moving, eyes half open, and thought, he's already made it further than anyone expected. I didn't know his name yet, but I knew I wasn't leaving until he had one. By morning, his breathing steadied, barely, but enough to make the room feel different. The German Shepherd puppy opened his eyes for the first time without fear, just confusion. He looked around like someone waking up in a world that had changed overnight. The vet handed me a small bowl of water. "Try this," she said quietly. I slid it into the kennel and waited. He stared at it for a long time. Then, with a trembling nose, he leaned forward and took one slow lick, and I swear you could hear it. The sound of life deciding to stay. He drank, stopped, then drank again. His paw twitched and his tail moved. Not much, just a small flick like a match catching light after rain. That's all it takes sometimes. One drop, one breath, one reason. When he finally looked up at me, his eyes weren't empty anymore. There was something there now, something fragile but real. Trust doesn't show up all at once, it sneaks in quietly like dawn. The vet smiled. "Look, he's responding." I nodded, not trusting myself to talk, because that brave pup had just done something far harder than surviving. He'd chosen to live. They said he'd be ready for transfer to the shelter in a few days. But when I turned to leave that morning, he lifted his head as if asking if I'd really go. And that look, it followed me all the way to the door. They said he was strong enough to move, so I drove him myself. The clinic gave me a small crate, a blanket, and a warning. "Don't push him. He's still fragile." Fragile. That word never sits right with me. You can be broken and still fierce. This German Shepherd puppy had already proved that. He sat in the crate, quiet, watching everything. The cars, the noise, the world moving too fast for someone who had almost left it. His fur still had that dull, sunburnt look from the heat. But his eyes, they were clearing up. Every few minutes, I'd glance at him through the rearview mirror, and he'd meet my eyes like he was memorizing the way home. At the shelter, I opened the crate, expecting him to hesitate. He didn't. The rescued puppy stepped out on shaky legs, took one look at the rows of kennels, and walked toward the sound of barking. Not fear, curiosity. That's when I knew he wasn't just recovering, he was returning. He sniffed around, slow and serious, like a young shepherd inspecting his new post. The other dogs barked, restless, but he stood still, head slightly tilted, tail low, calm. You could feel the staff stop and look. Sometimes courage is quiet. I led him to an open pen, laid the blanket down and said softly, "You made it, kid. This is your stop for now." He looked at me once more before lying down. His breathing was steady. His eyes stayed on the door. I thought he was waiting for me to leave. But when I turned to walk away, I realized he was waiting for someone to come. The first night in the shelter was quiet, too quiet. Most new dogs cry, bark, scratch, but not this one. The German Shepherd puppy just lay there, eyes half open like he was afraid to close them and lose the little piece he'd found. I sat across from his pen, pretending to check paperwork, but really just watching him breathe. Every rise of his chest felt like a secret I wasn't supposed to witness. He didn't trust the walls yet. I don't blame him. A rescued puppy doesn't see safety right away. He just sees another place where something might go wrong. At one point, the fan kicked on and he flinched so hard he nearly toppled the water bowl. His instincts were still in survival mode. Every sound meant danger, every movement meant run. But there was nowhere left to run. Not anymore. So I did the only thing that ever works in moments like that. I sat down on the floor. Didn't say a word, just waited. Minutes passed. He lifted his head, looked right at me, and then, so slowly it broke me, he crawled forward until his nose touched the edge of my shoe. That's how it starts. Not with a wag, not with a bark, with a touch that says, "Please don't leave yet." I didn't. I stayed until the lights dimmed, until his eyes finally gave in to sleep. When I stood up to leave, he let out a quiet sound, half sigh, half whimper, and somehow in that small, tired breath, I heard the first hint of trust. Morning came slow, the kind that feels heavy on your skin. I unlocked the shelter doors, coffee still too hot to drink, and found him sitting up, waiting. Not whining, not barking, just waiting, like a soldier on duty. His water bowl was empty, though I'd filled it before I left last night. But beside him was another bowl, slid halfway under the divider, and on the other side of that divider sat Nico, a small French Bulldog with eyes too round for his body and a snore like an old man. Apparently, Nico had decided to share. That's the kind of thing you learn in shelters. Dogs understand kindness long before people do. When I opened the gate, the German Shepherd puppy didn't rush me. He went straight to the divider and pressed his nose against it. Nico wagged his little stump of a tail, grunting like a tired engine. Two rescues, two different worlds, but they just fit. I sat down near them, feeling that same old lump in my throat. You spend your life saving animals, and somehow they still end up saving each other. The young shepherd leaned his head against the bars, eyes half closed, calm for the first time. Nico pushed a toy through the gap, a chewed-up tennis ball, barely holding together. He didn't bark, he didn't growl. He just took it, held it in his mouth, and stared at me. That was his way of saying, I'm still here. And right then, I believed him. But what none of us knew yet was that waiting would become his habit. Waiting for someone he didn't even know. By noon, the shelter was humming with the usual noise, doors clanging, bowls clattering, voices echoing down the hallway. But somehow, through all that sound, I heard it. A single, low whine coming from his pen. I looked over. The German Shepherd puppy was pacing, ears back, tail low, glancing toward the entrance every few seconds. Waiting again. Every time someone walked by, his eyes followed, hopeful, then dimming. That's when I realized he wasn't waiting for food or play. He was waiting for someone. We checked his microchip again. Nothing. No tag, no lead, just that faint ring of missing fur on his neck where a collar once was. Whoever had left him had done it clean, like cutting a page out of a story and pretending it never existed. I knelt by the bars. Hey, buddy, I whispered. He froze, then stepped closer. The kind of step that costs everything when you've been hurt before. His nose pressed against my hand, his breath trembled. And then, out of nowhere, he made that sound again. A small, broken exhale, halfway between a sigh and a cry. You don't forget that sound once you've heard it. It's the sound of a brave puppy remembering love. I stayed with him until closing, watching his eyes flicker between the door and me, like he was trying to choose who to believe in. And just as I turned off the lights, the door at the far end creaked open. A shadow stepped inside. Someone had come back. The man at the door wasn't who the German Shepherd puppy expected, or maybe somehow he was. Old denim jacket, hat too big for his head, hands shaking like leaves. He looked around, lost, the way people do when they're trying to recognize a memory that's already gone. I think that's him, he said quietly, eyes fixed on the young shepherd's pen. That's Riven. The name froze me. It wasn't on any record. Nobody had called this rescued puppy anything before, but when he heard it, Riven, his ears shot up, his tail twitched once, twice. Then he let out the smallest sound, a kind of whimper that cracked the whole room open. I swear, that little dog remembered. The man knelt down. He didn't reach for the gate right away. He just sat there, whispering something I couldn't hear. It wasn't joy. It wasn't guilt either. It was something deeper, that raw, trembling place where love and loss meet. Riven moved slow, cautious, like testing the edge of a dream. He sniffed the air, tilted his head, and took one shaky step forward. That's when I saw it. The faint scar across his paw, just like the man had described on the phone. A small mark, he'd said, from when he tried to climb out the fence. Yeah, this was his dog. And maybe this was his second chance, too. In the next pen, little Nico pressed his nose through the bars, whining softly, tail brushing the floor. Even he seemed to know something sacred was happening. The man looked up at me. His eyes were wet but steady. Can I hold him? And I said yes. But as he reached for the latch, Riven hesitated. He looked back at me first. And in that single look, I swear he was asking, is it okay to believe again? He didn't move right away. Riven stood there, halfway between two worlds, one that hurt him and one that tried to heal him. The man's hand trembled on the gate, waiting for a sign. You could have heard a pin drop. Even Nico stopped snoring. And then Riven took a single step, then another. Not because he remembered, but because he forgave. He pressed his head into the man's chest, slow and certain, the kind of touch that says, I'm still here. The man broke. You could see years of silence spill out all at once. I didn't mean to leave him, he whispered. They told me he didn't make it. Turns out, Riven had been left behind after a storm, a flash flood that destroyed half the property outside town. The man had searched, called, filed reports, nothing. Some rescuer must have found the German Shepherd puppy wandering miles from the site and brought him here. And somehow, fate finished what love started. But here's the part that gutted me. Riven wasn't just forgiving him, he was teaching all of us what mercy really looks like. The man stayed kneeling, arms around that brave pup, whispering something only Riven could understand. The little shepherd just breathed slow, calm, eyes closed. When he finally looked back at me, his face said everything. Not thank you, not sorry. Just a quiet nod, like two men agreeing that this time hope had won. I turned to lock the gate again, handshaking just a little. Behind me I heard it, a bark. One strong, clear, new bark. And somehow it sounded like the start of something, not the end. The paperwork took longer than the hugging. We did it by the book. Proof of ownership first. The man pulled out his phone and showed me photos of a younger German Shepherd puppy with the same dark mask and that faint scar across the front paw. He had an old vet record folded in his wallet, creased where it mattered. No microchip on file, but enough proof to make it right. We filled the reclaim form, added notes about heat recovery, hydration schedule, and follow-up with his vet. He signed. I signed. And Riven watched every pen stroke like it was a leash clicking open. I brought out a simple collar and a new tag with a fresh phone number. The young shepherd didn't flinch this time. He leaned into the touch, calm, steady, like a saved puppy memorizing what safe hands feel like. The man swallowed hard and clipped the leash, whispering, "I've got you, boy." No big speeches, just the soft sound of a promise being made. Then came the hard part. Nico. The little bulldog stood at the divider, round eyes glassy, tail twitching in these tiny, stubborn half circles. Riven walked over without a cue. No bark, no fuss. They touched noses through the bars and stayed there, still as a photograph that didn't want to be taken. Two rescue dogs who had held each other together when there wasn't much left to hold. I opened Nico's gate just enough for a closer goodbye, one hand on each harness. Riven pressed his forehead to Nico's for a heartbeat. Nico answered with a low grunt, the kind he used when the night felt too long. It wasn't drama, it was understanding. We sent them out the right way, a bag of food, recovery notes, a slip lead, and a small donation from the man that he insisted on making for the next frightened puppy, he said, voice thin. At the door, Riven stopped and looked back only once. He didn't ask permission this time. He was asking me to take care of the friend he couldn't bring. I watched the leash move forward until the hallway turned and the sound of their steps faded. Behind me, Nico let out one short, questioning whine, then picked up the chewed tennis ball and laid it by the gate, like saving a space. I turned off the lobby light and checked the messages. There was already a new notification from the number on that fresh tag, a video thumbnail waiting to be opened. A week later, the fountain stopped in the video, not broken, just quiet. The man wrote that Riven had learned to sleep beside it now, without flinching at the sound. He doesn't chase reflections anymore, he said. He just watches them move. I read it twice, because sometimes that's what healing really is, learning that movement isn't danger anymore, just life continuing. In the shelter, Nico was doing the same thing. He'd picked a corner by the gate where he could see every frightened puppy that came through. He never barked first. He just waited, steady, patient, like a little anchor in a world that keeps shifting. And somehow, that was enough. The new dogs followed his lead, laying down beside him, matching his breath, borrowing his calm. He wasn't the one rescued anymore. He was the one doing the rescuing. That's the quiet truth of every rescue story. You don't always get to take them home. Sometimes you leave a piece of yourself behind, sitting in a kennel, holding the world together for the next lost soul. And sometimes that's where you find peace. I shut down the computer and turned off the lights. For a moment, the shelter was still. Then came that soft, half snores, half sighs of sleeping dogs, like a room full of small heartbeats that finally trusted the dark. This little guy's journey from abandonment to rehabilitation shows how important nonprofit rescue groups really are. Caring for a rescued puppy is more than love. It's responsibility. It's pet care. Join our Brave Paws family. Be their voice. Be their hope.